Second graders, it's Miss Santos here, and the book that you're seeing in front of you is called Jabari Jumps, and the author's name is Gaia Cornwall. And in this book, we will be learning about a technique or techniques that the author Gaia used in her book that we can use in our own writing. So remember last week we learned about speech bubbles and how we can use speech bubbles the same way that the author Peter Reynolds used in Say Something in Word Collectors. So, and if you haven't watched that video and you want to learn about speech bubbles, you can also watch that, okay? So this book, as we read, I want you to listen in not only to the story, but see the techniques that the author has used in her book, okay? So let's go ahead and read it. And the book is called Jabari Jumps. I'm jumping off the diving board today, Jabari told his dad. Really? Said his dad. So I noticed that as soon as the book starts, it's beginning with the dad and Jabari talking, right? So that's an introduction that you can use when you're writing. So if you have characters and let's say you are talking to your mom, the same way Jabari is talking to his dad, you could start off the story the same way that the author started off this book. The diving board was high and maybe a little scary, but Jabari had finished his swimming lessons and passed his swim test, and now he was ready to jump. I'm a great jumper, said Jabari, so I'm not scared at all. Jabari watched the other kids climb the long ladder. They walked all the way out to the end of the board, as big as tiny bugs. Then they stood on the edge. They spread their arms and bent their knees and sprang up, up, up. And then they dove down, down, down. Splash! Looks easy, Jabari said. But when his dad squeezed his hand, Jabari squeezed back. So I noticed that in this page, Jabari talks about watching other kids climb the long ladder and how they walked all the way out to the end of the board and as big as tiny bugs. So that's how big the board looked, right? This board right here. And he's describing the kids who went up there, that they looked like tiny bugs. So I loved that technique that the author used. And she specifically used that to let us, the reader, know how big and long the board was, right? And the ladder was. So it's a great way to describe something. If you want us to know and paint a picture in our mind, you could use that, right? So if you're describing how big something was, you could use that same technique, right? Give us an example. Paint a picture in our mind. Jabari stood at the bottom of the ladder. He looked up. You can go before me if you want, he told the kid behind him. I need to think about what kind of special jump I'm going to do. Jabari thought and thought. So I see that he let the other kids go in front of him because he was thinking, right? He was thinking of how he was going to jump. He was thinking of other things, right? Do you think he was scared? I want you to think about that. Do you think that he got scared? Would you be scared? Jabari started to climb up and up. This ladder is very tall, he thought. Are you okay? Called his dad. I'm just a little tired, said Jabari. Maybe you should climb down and take a tiny rest, said his dad. A tiny rest sounded like a good idea. When he got to the bottom, Jabari remembered something. I forgot to do my stretches, he said to his dad. Stretching is very important, said his dad. I think tomorrow might be a better day for jumping, Jabari said. They looked up at the diving board together. So I'm still reading and I'm still noticing how I'm beginning to realize that Jabari may be scared of jumping, right? But I'm hearing, and the reason why I know this as a reader is because even though that idea of him being scared to jump or him thinking about it is a small idea, there's so many details that talks about that, right? So it lets me know as the reader that Jabari is scared to jump off this diving board. It's okay to feel a little scared, said his dad. Sometimes if I feel a little scared, I take a deep breath and tell myself I am ready. And you know what? Sometimes it stops feeling scary and feels a little like a surprise. Jabari loved surprises. So they're still at the pool. Remember, this book started, it took place, the setting, remember the setting is where the story is at. It took place with them at the pool, and we're still reading the book and they're still at the pool, right? And his dad is telling Jabari that it's okay to be scared. Everyone gets scared. Jabari took a deep breath and felt it fill his body from the ends of his hair right down to the tips of his toes. Okay, so again, I see that the author used that technique to describe how much of a deep breath Jabari took in, right? She said it filled his body up from the end of his hairs right down to the tip of his toes. So it was a huge deep breath, right? And I wouldn't have known how big and deep it was unless the author perfectly described it for me, the reader, right? Jabari looked up. He began to climb up and up and up and up until he got to the top. Jabari stood up straight. He walked all the way to the end of the board. So I also love that the author is giving us pictures, right? Illustrations of Jabari in his moments. And she could have easily said Jabari is scared to jump off the diving board or Jabari jumps off the diving board. But she's giving me details. So she's not only saying Jabari jumps off the diving board, she's also saying Jabari looked up, he began to climb, up, up, and up, and up, until he got to the top, and he walked all the way to the end of the board. So she gave me details. Even though it's a small idea, she stretched it out, and she did it with giving a lot of details. So do you think that's something you can do in your writing? His toes curled around the rough edge. So his toes right here, I can see the rough edge. She described the diving board perfectly because if you've never been on a diving board, and if you have, you know that the edges are really rough. So the author painted a picture in my mind. Because what if I've never been on a diving board? Am I going to know how it feels? No. But reading this helps me and gives me an image in my mind as a reader to know how it feels. And it makes me feel like I'm there, where Jabari's at. Jabari looked out as far as he could see. It felt like he was ready. I love surprises, he whispered. So, do you guys think that he's scared? It looks pretty high up there, right? He took a deep breath and spread his arms and bent his knees. Then he sprang up off the board, flying. Now, do you think that Jabari was really flying? No, he probably was. He was not flying. But I loved this technique that the author used to describe how Jabari felt. He felt like he was flying. And that allows us, the reader, to know how Jabari felt. So that's also something that you can use in your writing. Jabari hit the water with a splash. Wow, that's pretty cool. I love these this bold word, right? It's a splash. So it lets me know, the reader, that that was a big splash. Instead of just writing splash, this lets me know how big it was. So that's also something that you could do in your writing. Down, down, down he went. And then back up, whoosh. So another sound, this is, and it's a sound effect. So it lets me know what sound was happening. It was like whoosh, right? Because that's when he came back up from the water. So you could also do this, the same thing that the author did here, splash, splash. And then don't forget the punctuation mark, which is an exclamation mark. And then again, whoosh, whoosh. So I love this, and that's a technique that you can also use in your writing when you want the reader to know, and just, it makes your writing pop and it comes to life. And another thing that I love that the author used is that instead of just saying down, she not only did pictures, but she repeated her words, but she stretched it out. So down, down, down he went. Jabari, you did it, said his dad. I did it, said Jabari. I'm a great jumper. And you know what? What, said his dad. Surprise! Double backflip is next. So, I love this story for many reasons because, well, for one, everyone has had a fear just how Jabari has had, right? And Jabari was able to face his fear and eventually get over it. But I noticed that this book, it took place at the pool. And even though it was a small idea of Jabari jumping, because that's really what the story was about, Jabari jumping, it was so interesting to see how the author was able to have that small idea and stretch it out by including details and details and details, right? So the author included how Jabari's dad was able to talk him into it and tell him it's okay to be scared. And it talks about what Jabari did when he got up the ladder. He began to look up, he began to climb up. It gives you details. The author was very good in describing that small idea and just stretching it out and making it into a story, which is something that you can also do as well, okay? So don't forget that when you are writing about your small idea moment. I hope you guys enjoyed this book as much as I did. Bye.